I would acknowledge when you see the movie The Breakfast Club, probably thinking about financial affairs as one of the last things. It was more of a social experiment. And one I'm interested to see that they never did a sequel of. It was kind of one of those things that you can only really talk about once, and the lessons that were to be learned had to come out that one time. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Prairie Fire Podcast. Very excited about today's episode. When I was just kicking off the podcast, I made reference to at some point where we might have some episodes about money lessons from the 1980s. Well, guess what? Today is our first episode as we examine some lessons from the culture, the pop culture, and excited nature of the 1980s. So for those of you that grew up in the 80s like I did, junior high, high school, college, lots was going on. The political environment was much calmer. We didn't have a lot of fights in the streets and all the craziness that we have today. So much was going on in the pop culture area, from Michael Jackson to Madonna to the way people were dressing, all the funky clothes, the psychedelic music, the alternative 80s stuff that was coming out. And just in general, it was kind of a carefree time. It definitely was, just because I was younger. Many of you that experienced the 80s while you were growing up probably very much felt the same way. And so as I was contemplating doing money lessons from the 1980s, I pulled out a few pieces of this pop culture, in particular some movies that I thought had some interesting lessons to them that you wouldn't really think about in financial terms for sure, but even that there was lessons to learn maybe from some of these pieces of pop culture. So excited to share this. And the very first one today is The Breakfast Club. Many of you will remember this movie. We had 5 high school students that were detained. This was in 1985 from director John Hughes. And these 5 came in for detention on a Saturday. And they had all done something wrong. And throughout the course of the movie, we found out what those things were that caused them to get detention. And for some, like the criminal John, he ended up getting even more detentions as a result of detention. So wasn't serving its purpose apparently, but nonetheless, it seemed to be just kind of an entertaining film. But as you peel back the layers of the onion on this one, there were a number of different lessons that could be learned or pulled from this. So for one, there was a lot of stereotypes that were broken down, in my opinion, in this movie. Everybody had a preconceived notion about each of the characters, even each other, even the characters amongst each other had a preconceived notion about what was going on in each of their lives. Stereotype of a criminal or an athlete or a prom queen. And as they move through the movie and they get to know each other a little bit better, we find out that many of those stereotypes weren't true to their character or who they really were, or there was things going on behind the scenes that no one understands. And that then moved on to the second part of that movie that I felt like everybody showed a lot of vulnerability. Not at first. They were all trying to be tough and live out their roles for sure. But as they got to know each other a little bit more, they did display some vulnerability. And then the third was just the whole high school dynamic of trying to keep up with each other and peer pressure, dealing with what our peers think, trying to fit in. It was just huge for everyone in high school, still is, I imagine. But back then, you can just remember how that felt, that, boy, I'm not in the in crowd. I'm not with the athletes. I'm not with we had the freaks and jocks at my school. So people were athletic or they were focused on cars or those kind of things. And so it's interesting when I look back now of these 3 different areas that were going on in this movie, and definitely going on in all of our lives when we were growing up through the 80s. And so, why do I bring these up, or what's the legacy of that? Well, I think that in our money lessons and the things that we learn about money over time, we also have a lot of stereotypes that we build up. And it can be difficult to be vulnerable about those money stereotypes or mistakes that we've made, because we feel like we've set a trend that can't change. And inevitably in money, and many of the folks that we meet with, and just I've seen it in my own life over time, there's that trying to keep up with the Joneses. What's my ideal, and why does it always have to compare to what somebody else's ideal is, or what society dictates what it is? So I want to peel this back a little bit in some of those areas that they did talk about each of these characters, and see if there's a few things that we can learn from the crazy crew at the Breakfast Club.
So it's sort of social, demented and sad, but social, right? So it's sort of social.
I gotta play it again.
Demented and sad, but social, right?
So we remember this scene. He was talking about the chess club, that the nerdy guy in the movie, Brian, was in chess club. And he's like, well, It's social. I'll grant you that. You are doing it with other people, but maybe it didn't fit into Bender's perception of what a good club would be. So once again, coming in with some stereotypes. So when we look at it through a lens of money or a lens of financial decision making, a few things that we hear from people as they're getting ready for retirement, empty nesting, whatever transition they might be in the second half of life. One is that it's too late. I haven't saved enough. I haven't done enough. I've been helping my kids. I've been helping my parents. I've done everything for everyone else, and I've done nothing for myself. Or the opposite, I've done too much for myself, lived too much, and it's too late. I'm just going to have to live on Social Security. So breaking down that stereotype is very important because it's never too late. It just depends on what kind of lifestyle you want and the trade-offs that you're willing to make to get that lifestyle. And so one stereotype that we hear frequently is, yeah, it's too late. I can't change anything. The second is that I can't learn anything new. Once I've developed my financial pathway or the things that I understand, like just putting money in a savings account or a CD, that's all I need to know. And I don't want to learn more new things. It's too complicated. It's too much. And so learning new things and bringing in new experiences, bringing in financial advice in many cases can be a big help here. But we do hear this one a lot, is that I don't feel like I can learn new things. I've come too far in life. I'm stuck in my ways, all those kind of things. And I think that's something that we can crack. And then in financial matters, just as it was in peer pressure in high school, keeping up with the Joneses, seeing somebody has a bigger house, somebody has saved more in their retirement plan. Boy, I bet they're doing really well because of X, Y, or Z. I want to break this down in terms of each of the characters in this movie. So I'm going to start with Andrew, who is the athlete. So the stereotype for Andrew was that he was defined by his physical prowess, his social status. And that happens to a lot of us. We become defined by either our past financial mistakes or things that we've done, or even our successes. So we think whatever happened in the past has to happen in the future. So maybe we start a business and then over time it becomes less successful because that business isn't needed in the marketplace as much. Or we make a horrible mistake financially, like the Wolf of Wall Street, that Jordan Belfort, who he just went off the rails and then later in life was able to catch that back. So if you remember the movie with Andrew, he had hurt somebody that was on his wrestling team and ended up feeling really, really bad about it. And so they thought it would be funny at the time, and he made a mistake and was carrying that with him. And so here I would just say, if we've made a mistake in the past, if we've made financial decisions that feel like it's too late to make changes to, is really think about the potential for change and understand that past financial decisions aren't going to dictate necessarily our future opportunities, that we can grow on and change from that. So as I flip through these pictures, I was amazed at how great some of these guys look. Emilio Estevez here looks pretty good as he's moved on. It's always stark to see the change in age, and that's of course happened to all of us over time. But did find it interesting as we looked at these folks, how well many of them have aged, and curious as to what many of them are doing there. Some I think are acting, some not so much. But anyway, with Andrew, I felt like, boy, he'd made a mistake and felt like he could move on from that. And then he met the others in the Breakfast Club, and it helped him find some hope, start a new relationship, those kind of good things. All right. And then Claire, she was the prom queen. She lived kind of a charmed life. And you learned through the movie that she felt like, you think I'm so lucky and you think I've got everything, but the pressure that I live under was way too much. And so we have a financial parallel to this, is that the belief that some people are just lucky with money. I fight this one a lot because I see people that either, make an investment that does really, really well, or they have had just a series of financial decisions they made that have worked out amazing, or they started a business or a series of business, and like, man, are they just lucky, or do they just know what things are? And in many cases, financial success is really about strategic planning and perseverance, just sticking with it. And I call this living in the gain, not the gap. This is based on a book by the same name by Dan Sullivan from Strategic Coach. And he talks about how we can always live in the gap where we're making excuses, or we believe that somebody else has it better than we do. And living in the gain means that you refuse to do that. You take responsibility and find the good things. And one of the ways you find the good things is to look how far you've come. Look how far you've gained over time. So for those that feel like, boy, I haven't done enough. All right, well, let's take a look at that. What have you saved over the last 20 years? What have you managed to pay down in debt over those years? How have you managed to advance your career? How have you managed to potentially start a business? so many things that we can look at from the viewpoint of a gain, not a gap, that can really change a stereotype and a money message that we might be living from that isn't suiting us any longer. So for Claire, if you'll remember, she really broke down and just said, you have no idea what it's like being me, and you think I'm so lucky. But in many ways, I have a lot of growing to do in a lot of areas that I feel vulnerable. And so when we see others and we want to keep up with the Joneses or the folks that we feel are doing better, in a lot of cases, we don't really know what's going on there. And so to assume that their financial picture is a lot better than yours doesn't get you anywhere. And so living in the gain just means take a good look at both of the successes that we have had and take responsibility for where we're at today and how we're going to make that forward and not live in the woe is me gap area where we make excuses and try to look for other victims. All right. And she looks great too, by the way. Change is possible. He looks more like a character from Harry Potter as he's aged here. So I don't know what we could say about Judd here as he's aged, but he was John Bender in the movie and was definitely a primary character just because he got so much focus on from getting in trouble in the movie, getting him out of the room into the hallways and into other trouble. Just seemed like a troublemaker in general, but made a lot of stark comments to the other parts of the Breakfast Club that really struck them. That even though he had a tough exterior, he had the ability to really impress his ideas on others. And I also felt like he really demonstrated this principle that change is possible. So back in the day, when I was first got my CFP and was trying to get some more experience, I started to teach financial planning classes at the Polk County Jail. And the inmates that are there, it's usually a temporary situation from them, and they're able to, if they're on good behavior, take classes, and financial planning was one of them. And so we would just talk about the basics of debt, money management, setting up bank accounts, those kind of things. And so many of them had a tough past, but their ability to learn and their ability to say redemption is possible for me, and I've got an idea for a business, and I really want to turn things around, it just shows the importance of resilience and how that can happen. And so change is possible. If you've made either financial mistakes or you feel like things are too far gone, or you want to change the way that you're saving more frequently, or you want to start becoming an investor, or you really want to enhance the value of your business, change is definitely possible. And I feel like Bender was a good example of that, as he changed not only his life, but the people around him throughout the movie, as he would give them those harsh comments, but also very, very interesting insights. All right, Allie, I'm calling the Roaring Kitty. I don't know if any of you have seen the movie Dumb Money, but it's about the meme stocks during COVID, where the guy thought GameStop was going to go up. And so got a lot of press for that. But she reminds me of this, where she was very unconventional, very eccentric. She was a loner. In the movie, she seemed to have some mental illness issues, wanted to be left alone. But in the end, she had come because she wanted to be part of something. She wanted connection. And so in many cases, people follow unconventional financial paths. They could follow Roaring Kitty and buy meme stocks. They could follow crypto, feeling more like gamblers, want to really shun Wall Street. And I get that. The impression of Wall Street that's been made over the years is not a good one. And you feel like they're always against you. And so many people are misunderstood as they get into their financial strategies. And so they try to do crazy things. And I don't always think this is a bad thing. I don't think there has to be a one-size-fit-all to the way that you manage your money. But sometimes it can be good to have a community that can bring you along and support you in this. But thinking outside the box is a good thing in many cases, not just in our money, but our life. And so one-size-fits-all isn't the way that I would approach the way you're managing money, and why we firmly believe in customizing everything that we do for our clients, because all are in a different place in life, all have been in a different place in life. And so understanding that you are unique and you can do it your way is a great way to live. All right. So our nerdy little fella here, this was Brian, and he was got in trouble because I believe he had a flare gun in his locker, and so was having a hard time, was afraid that he was going to get in trouble with his parents. And so just a very big overachiever, but a little bit socially awkward. And so once again, for all five of them, they really wanted to fit in. And so that can definitely be the case with Brian, but he was smart. And so when it was time to write the letter, when it was time to talk about different things comments, like where the fire escapes were. I just remember that. It's funny. Brian was a big helper in that. And so in a lot of cases, when it comes to money, we can feel like it's too complicated. Only smart people can handle it. You've got to have financial expertise. But financial literacy can be learned at any age. And there are continuous ways to learn. There is so much available out there on the internet, et cetera, that you can learn about financial questions. And of course, working with a financial advisor, we think is a great way to have a partner in that process. They truly are a partner to you and not just trying to sell you something. But no matter what's gone on in life, it's never too late to add some financial literacy and move on from there. So I would acknowledge when you see the movie The Breakfast Club, probably thinking about financial affairs as one of the last things. It was more of a social experiment. And one I'm interested to see that they never did a sequel of. It was kind of one of those things that you can only really talk about once. And the lessons that were to be learned had to come out that one time. But the social experiment and the interaction of all of these kids really influenced the culture of the 80s quite a bit and showed many of us that were still in high school. I would have been a junior in high school in 1985, that we need to be more accommodating and that the stereotypes that we have for each other aren't a good fit. And it goes the same when we think about financial stereotypes, where we believe that we know something about somebody's financial affairs, or wow, they're way better off than we are, et cetera, may not always be true. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've going to be putting 4 more of these out, so stay tuned and subscribe because I've got exciting 80s pop culture references coming from other movies. But just to recap, The Breakfast Club is a great film, a great story about 5 high school kids and going through detention on one Saturday, one day of their life, and I feel like it changed them all. And they signed off as The Breakfast Club. And so they found a group, they found a team. Now, how that went from there, who knows? But it was an interesting experiment and something that I'll always remember. And I'm guessing many of you that tuned in here today will as well. So if you want to learn more about us at Prairie Fire and how we can help, please check us out at www.pfwplanning.com. And I thank you so much for being here today. Don't you forget about me. I couldn't actually play the song because there's copyrights. So you get my version instead. Thanks so much. See you.